Hey guys, welcome to the Together for Good podcast, your guide into the real and inspired marriage and life adventure that you never knew was possible. I'm Meredith Osterhaus, the daughter of your hosts, Dan and Melodie Griffin. Mom and Dad's teaching, stories, and experiences with lots of laughing mixed in will move you to make your marriage last, all while making a difference in the world around you. Are you ready? Here we go!
We're in the middle of a series called Now What? So today we're talking about my kids are a higher priority than my marriage. Now what? And I think all of us have found ourselves in that place before.
If you got kids, absolutely.
Yeah.
I love this series because we're having conversations with real life friends of ours who we think are funny and really smart. And they have kids and they're married. So they've already
checks all the boxes.
Yes. Good night.
Yeah.
So I love these real life conversations. Our hope is that as you're listening, as you're watching, that there are so many moments through the podcast where you go, yes, I totally relate to that. Me too. Oh my goodness, I'm not the only one. We're not the only one that go through that. So this whole, when we first were married, man, we had all the time for each other, and we spent time being intentional to get to know each other.
Yeah.
And then kids happened. And it was great and it was wonderful, but it kind of hijacks a marriage if you're not careful, if you're not intentional.
It is. So why don't you invite our friends into the conversation?
I would love to do that. How would you like for me to do that?
I don't know.
Okay, well let's do it. Okay, I would like to know. So we have friends here. We have Lindsay and we have Zach Farrar. Glad to have you. And then we also have Chris and Bridget Winston.
Hello.
One cool thing.
I want to know, where is the cantina in Nashville?
Poncho and Lefty's Cantina, and right off of Music Road.
There you go.
In Nashville.
I have a t-shirt. I'm wearing a cool t-shirt too.
You are very.
All right,
cool
they'll
t-shirt.
tell them what your t-shirt says.
Since
the
we're
official
talking
sponsor
about,
of.
that's exactly right. Yeah. So there are times that I have seen husbands literally live this out as it relates to, I'm just going to hold back and I'm going to just do whatever she says. So this is my favorite t-shirt, and I'll get guys literally, they'll read it in a Walmart and they just start busting like that. It's just great.
What does it say?
Well, they can read it.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
For our podcast listeners.
Our listeners. Oh,
I do
see?
what the voices in my wife's head tell me to do.
Yeah.
But that is next level husbanding when
Yes.
you know what is in your wife's head and she doesn't even have to say
Yes.
it.
You have given me something to aspire to.
Yes, there
Yes.
you go. Double entendre to your shirt.
I love it.
Thank you, Bridget.
So we're talking about real life stuff where we're married, we have kids. We love that we have kids. This is not an anti-kid
That's
podcast.
right.
This is how do we be intentional with child rearing and with our marriage. So I would ask either couple can take the bait first. But is there a time in your marriage where you thought, oh my, the tail is wagging the dog?
Tuesday.
No matter what day you're listening.
It was so succinct. It was like a Jeopardy answer. Yeah. What is Tuesday?
It may be helpful to your listeners too to know what ages and stages.
Yeah,
It
that's
would
right.
be.
Absolutely.
It would.
Well, and to that end as well, Chris and Bridget, you've now been married for how many years?
Oh, quick math.
18 almost.
18
Almost
years.
18
Coming up this year.
And 2 boys.
2 boys, 2 teenagers, 15, and by the time your listeners hear this, 13.
Nice.
Yeah.
And I really like your children. Well done.
Thank you.
Good
Yeah,
boys.
go ahead, Zach and Lindsay.
So we've been married coming up on 6 years, and we have 2 boys. Josiah's 4, and Nathaniel just turned 2.
Here's what's really, Melodie and I just celebrate, actually this summer will be 31 years of marriage, and our kids are grown and not all gone. So our oldest son, Jonathan, is 22. He's 26.
Yes.
Abby is 22. Meredith is 22, and Savannah's 19. She just turned 19. So, we got kids.
A lot of different faces.
Which is great.
Which is really,
I
really,
love that
really cool.
we have that. So tell us, anything you want to tell us about
Bridget was going to go into
a time that you had a real
Tuesday.
tell us about Tuesday.
So
Tell
Tuesday.
us about
Right.
Tuesday. Tell us about all the Tuesdays.
I think our situation at this point is just that our boys are busy and we are busy. We both work full time. we're so proud of our boys. They're involved in so many things and really good at it, and really awesome kids doing really great things. But it means that we are in the car all the time, usually in separate cars. One or both of them has to drive downtown Columbia at night. So we just are kind of...
Which is about a 25, 30-minute drive from where we live.
On a good night.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, we finally all get home around 8:15, 8:30.
Oh, wow.
And we're still very intentional about sitting down to dinner together. Or if some of us cannot wait that long, at least sitting together. Some have already eaten. But, just sometimes Chris and I just feel like ships passing in the night, Tag, you're it. I'm out. I'm, jumping in the car. You're jumping in the car.
Yeah.
We leave the house at 7 a.m. and don't get home till 8:30 at night sometimes.
Long days.
Which
And
means
then
we get home
by
at
9
8:30.
o'clock, I'm asleep.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a short window.
It's a short window. Yeah, it is a short window for us.
Yeah.
So we're in a different phase where we're not out of the house that late, which is
But
taxing.
we
And
are tied to the house.
we're tied to the house, and it's like it's 6:45. We are done.
That
We're-
sounds
I
actually.
check out at 7 when the boys are
Right.
in bed, and
That kind of
but it's
sounds
like-
wonderful to you, doesn't
Right.
it, Lindsay? To be out and about a little bit.
Listen, well, I stay home with our boys for the most part. I work part-time,
Yeah.
but most of that is done either from home or while they're at school.
So ours is less maybe activity outside the house, although that does happen, and it's just from the moment I get home, it is a sprint to bedtime. So
Yeah.
there's play a little bit, dinner, bath time, contain whatever meltdown's happening, and then bedtime.
Because you do not mess with bedtime.
No, you don't mess with bedtime. You don't mess with bedtime.
Yeah.
And there's just this for us it is a different kind of energy suck, right? Where we are in the same building, but we are not necessarily together.
Right.
So you guys may be in different cars, experiencing the exact same problem, but in a different way. So
Well, our kids
good.
are little, so they
Right.
require they require different things from us. We're still teaching them, like, hey, don't color on the walls. Hey, when you need to go to the bathroom, you actually have to go to the bathroom to do that. Please, like, don't pick a spot on the carpet, or I don't know. You're in the phase of potty training, and they can't feed themselves, and
Or
there's
every-
all these
you're on, like,
life
this-
skil's that you're teaching.
you're on this
and-
emotional hair trigger where you're like, is this going to be okay? It is? Okay. Because last night it wasn't.
Are the footsie pajamas okay tonight?
but we're good tonight. We're good?
We're good.
Well, and in both cases, like, it's hard to even finish a conversation. I mean, when you have
Yes.
little kids, you get interrupted.
Oh, we had that happen
and,
today.
Yeah.
And even when they see you talking, they don't care.
Yeah, we were trying to have a important,
Right.
deep conversation today.
Yeah.
We're laying on our bed, and our kids are watching a TV in the other room, and all of a sudden you hear the door open, you hear, "Daddy?" And you're just like, this is the first time I've had
Right.
in a week to have a good
It's
conversation
like the
with my
only
wife.
time you really have to have conversation is while they're sleeping. So you have nap time and you have bedtime.
Where's your windows?
But Zach's got to be at work at 5 a.m. and he works an hour and a half away depending on the commute. So same kind of situation.
Yeah.
He needs to be asleep by 8 o'clock. Our kids go to bed at 7. By the
sure.
time you clean the house
Small
and
windows.
eat
Here's what's
dinner.
interesting, because we're at a different phase now. And though, if you know our story, and if you don't, check out our website, wearetogetherforgood.com. But I just keep praying for empty nest.
Please let the nest be empty.
Yes, I keep praying for empty nest.
Fly away.
But right now, because we have two young adults with special needs, Jonathan and Abby, and my mother-in-law just moved in, right? So they keep coming back. But even with that, they kind of have their own space. But what ends up happening is, because you've had that kind of a dynamic going on for 10, 15 years, now all of a sudden, who is this person that is my spouse? And you feel like, oh my gosh, I don't even know them anymore.
And we may not even know her. I may not know myself. You may not know I became, you're in a season where for a while you had spit up claws.
Just putting on clean clothes was a real victory.
Right.
Every
You-
day.
you-
Yeah.
It's also a real roll of the dice because you were just like,
Don't wear something too nice.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
and I
Oh, you
know
like the shirt?
I know parents of you have a band kid. I know parents that have a band kid, a dance kid, and while there's nothing unhealthy about being a band parent or a dance parent,
Or sports parent.
You've
Yeah,
probably
all of those
seen
things.
parents that get
Holy cow, yeah.
That's their whole identity.
Yeah.
And that's their whole life, and they love it. And I've literally seen parents, once their kids graduate, they're like, I don't, what do I do?
Right.
Like,
Can I still go to the baseball games?
No, 'cause that makes you
Really?
weird, right?
Yes, stalker. Exactly. So how do we maintain that identity of who we are in
Well,
the midst of all those different weird
So
seasons?
again, with our focus with Together for Good, listen, different folks do it differently, and we're not here to tell you how to parent your kids. That's not our shtick.
Because really we don't know how. So,
Well, no.
find a
Well,
book or
we
something.
did it really differently, and part of it was because our first child had special needs. Jonathan's sleep schedule, and if you talk to anyone, there's this weird thing with Down syndrome kids. They sleep in all kinds of weird positions. It's kind of strange, but we never had a set bedtime, and so that just kind of carried over, and basically we ran them till they were just dog tired
poor
and they
Meredith
passed
and
out.
Savannah never had.
So we didn't have all of that strict schedule, and part of it also had to do with some other things going on in our life. So that's really not what we're focused on, regardless of how you navigate into that space. How do you make your marriage a priority, regardless of what season you're in? So, Chris, Bridget, as you guys right now, your boys are blowing and going, right? I mean, you guys are doing swimming, you're doing band, you got it all rocking and rolling. Both of you working full time. What are some things that you've done intentionally for
Big
Bridget and
or
Chris?
small?
Yeah.
Well,
You can do rock paper scissors if you want to.
you go ahead. I've spoken already. You can speak.
No, I was just going to say the G chat screen while we're both at work. Turn off the.
I hope my boss isn't listening.
That's where the real conversations take place.
Interesting.
Seriously.
And usually
Unemployment for 300.
usually it's Bridget sending a message at like 9, and then me getting back to my desk at 10:15.
Yeah.
And then her getting
Right.
back after lunch.
Yes.
So it takes all day to have one
It is
simple
so
who's
true.
picking up the kids.
So true.
Conversation.
For our younger listeners, GChat is apparently something other than texting. If you're under the age of 40, we just text each other.
It is where you can look like you're working because you're typing on your computer.
Oh, I'm sending an email.
It's texting without holding your phone.
Right.
This is some smart people
they-
at the cantina.
And so that's one of the ways that I think we stay in touch, and that's honestly sometimes the only time of day that we're actually going to connect, just the two of us, and talk about maybe a trip that's coming up, or maybe some sort of childcare situation we might have, or it's all about transportation with our boys, the ages they are. So I think that's a big point of us, and we try to carve out times, a date night where we can now leave the boys maybe unsupervised, maybe.
How big a deal is a date night to you guys?
Huge. And that's what I was going to say initially, back to when our kids were younger. We found a friend who also really wanted a date night.
Yeah.
And we both were
Bartered
stay-at-home
it.
moms. Right. We both were stay-at-home moms, so
So
didn't have a ton
smart.
of money. So we would alternate. She would come to our house after our kids all had early bedtime. So 7 o'clock, she would come to our house and sit, and we would go out, usually just to Barnes & Noble, and look at books that we never bought.
Been there, done that.
Hope you're not listening, Barnes & Noble.
Sometimes.
Thank you, Barnes. and Nobles.
Sometimes,
The other sponsor of the Together for Good.
Sometimes we would go to Target and just kind of wander aimlessly and then end up buying the gallon of milk that we needed on the way home.
Yeah.
But, to get out of the house, to get away
Yes.
from the dishes
Yes,
and the
yes,
laundry
yes.
and everything else. And so that was a great way to do it when they were younger. And then as they got older and we moved back here, Chris's parents have always been really great about taking the boys out to dinner so that we could go out to dinner. But the date night aspect has gotten easier now that they're older. 'Cause
Yeah, right.
If there's a Tuesday night where we have to drop them both off somewhere and we have an hour,
Yes.
we could go out to dinner.
It immediately becomes a date. It's
Right,
just, it's
right.
intentional connecting.
Right.
And that's what and again, the real question is, what are you doing intentionally, right? You show me your calendar, and I can show you what your priorities are. And something else I've done with a lot of the training that I've done in the past, as it relates to time management. I don't believe you can manage time. There's 168 hours in the week. You get to manage yourself. And the problem is, as it relates to our calendar, if we don't manage our own calendar, I guarantee you somebody else will.
You bet.
So one thing I encourage all of our listeners to do, you own your calendar. And if you block it out, you're much more likely that it's going to happen. Simple as that.
Yeah.
Simple as that. What do you guys, how do you tap into intentional?
So I've got something, but I'll let you go first because I went first too. So you go, and then I'll jump in.
I would say I don't think this is something that we've figured out yet or really great at. Honestly, when we were first married, we were both finishing master's degrees and working extra jobs and all the things. And then we had Josiah, a little over a year of marriage. So we've really always had a really jam-packed schedule. And I don't know that we have embraced the date night or things like that as well as we could have, because babysitters are expensive. We didn't have a friend, or I will take it back. We have had friends who've been gracious enough to offer, but it's the consistency of it has never been great for us. But we've gone through phases where, as silly as it sounds, we went through a phase where we would work on puzzles together, which sounds like a real grandma thing to do, but
I love that.
It kind of forced us. It was something that wasn't the TV. It wasn't something that we were.
It's about being intentional, though.
It put us across from each other, and we were focusing on something, but also we found that conversation kind of naturally started to come. That was beyond. What did the kids do today? Because I think in the season of parenting that we're in, there's also a real need for time just for yourself to process what's happening.
Sure.
And so that competes against your time together, but also you kind of need that, at least for me as a mostly stay-at-home mom, I kind of need some of that alone time so that I can talk about things other than, well, this is what the kids did today. Well, this is how I parented, and then I thought through this. And so it's getting out of mom mode, which is a big part of who I am right now, into wife mode so that we can talk about things that are bigger than that. So I
love the puzzle idea before you continue, because I think the psychosomatics are that you don't have to sometimes you don't have to look at each other, you're looking at the puzzle. So it's less threatening if you want to talk about things that are harder and you're doing something with your hands. It's amazing how some of your defenses some of your defenses go down. We've said this before, but some of our best conversations happen shoulder to shoulder in the car when we are we have a more extended, even 20 to 30 minute ride somewhere where things come up more naturally and we're not having to look at each other and we're shoulder to shoulder.
And I think that as a general rule, men gravitate more to the shoulder to shoulder. But what's also important is make sure that there are times you're turning knee to knee. So find ways to intentionally be knee to knee, and find ways to be shoulder to shoulder.
And I interrupted Lindsay. I want to make sure she gets to finish what she was saying.
Well, the other thing I was going to say is Zach's job that he has now is he's gone through several schedule changes in the different jobs that he's had, and this one he has to be out the door. His alarm goes off at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning, and my schedule was to, when the kids were in bed, I would clean the house, and then I would stay up. I kind of love that. I don't know if any moms can relate that time of that night where it's dark and everything kind of comes in. It's just quiet. You can just soak it in that nobody needs you right now. But what was happening is that he needed to be in bed asleep while I was enjoying my quiet house, and then I was sleeping when he was getting up in the morning.
Right.
So I'm not perfect at it, but I've tried to start shifting my morning so that I'm getting up when he goes to work, and then that puts us in the same evening schedule too. So instead of having opposite schedules and all these other things going for our time, at least our schedule and our time when we're awake is a bit more aligned. We have a few moments in the morning. I haven't been great about it recently in the last couple weeks because we've been struggling with a lot of sickness. But the heart and the intention is that we can have a little bit of FaceTime in the morning, and then our evening schedule is the same too.
That will prepare you well for having teenagers too, because we've shifted. I mean, they stay up way later than we do now, and so we've shifted to morning time. We'll get up and watch a show together, and for us that is kind of our downtime, is to watch a show together.
Wow.
Yes.
And so Saturday and Sunday morning we're up a couple hours before them.
Sure some technical stuff's happening, as you can tell.
Lindsay, something that you said really resonated with me. Dan and I are on opposite body clocks. I mean, just temperament or whatever. Night owl.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Night
And he
owl.
says he's a middle of the day kind of guy, but he definitely does better with the morning than I do.
I am more effective in the morning.
I am not
Much
more
more
effective in the morning.
Right around
Melody
3
kinda-
p.m. I'm ready to go.
Melody oozes into her day.
I do. And so, one of the things I've noticed, you mentioned the importance, if at all possible, to go to bed together at the same times. There have been times that I have literally gone to bed when he went to bed, knowing that I was going to get back up later. But there was something very intentional, and I'm not just talking about a physical relationship. I'm talking about just that intimate
Physical
time
space, yeah.
of being, in the bed together.
It was important to me. It felt close.
You'll
It
say,
felt
I sleep
intimate.
better when you're there. I
Yep.
rest better when you're there.
Yep.
And so, I was trying to pay attention to him asking that. Selfishly, I wanted to stay up. And so that was something I needed to do or even wanted to do.
And it goes back to what Dan was saying. So, really great book, The Four Loves by C.S. Lewis. And he talks about how there's 4 types of love, right? There's, I can't remember all 4, but the big 2 that he really talks about are friendship and romantic love. And in friendship, you don't look at each other and say, you're so beautiful, but you look at something together and you say, wow, isn't that neat?
Oh.
Right? Athletics, whatever your thing is, movies, whatever. And so you can be shoulder to shoulder to literally hundreds of people, thousands of people throughout your life. But in marriage, you look at each other and you're like that person's one person that looks at them in a very special way and says, you're beautiful. Right? And that is something we don't hear a lot in the world. It's something we don't say to ourselves intrinsically. But this thought of there is one person in my life who will look at me and choose me and love me.
Yeah.
And so when you get that flipped and you are primarily just shoulder to shoulder and then this stops happening, it can be really destructive.
Here's the takeaway, because again, kids are beautiful and they are wonderful, and we wouldn't take anything for them, right? But if you're not intentional, you can watch yourself. We've all seen it, right? I've seen people draw further and further apart, and then when the kids are gone, because hopefully you're raising them to leave,
That's the intention.
right?
Get out.
Yeah. How many stories could we tell today of the couples that as soon as the kids leave, they get divorced?
Yeah, it's actually a really common thing. So psychologists and counselors, they call it triangulation, right? So it's this, you can get into this habit of, think of a triangle, and you've got, a lot of times you'll have a parent who's closer to one particular child, right? And they set up this really unique bond. And then what ends up happening is you form this triangle where one parent's the hero, the other one's the antagonist, and then the hero is always saving the child. So you've got a victim-hero scenario there. And then what you're actually doing is you're actually cutting the legs out from under your spouse having a relationship with that child. Because what'll happen, let's say if Lindsay were to have a very close, intimate relationship with one of our sons, and she starts sharing things with him that she won't with me, I'm going to start to resent my son. Right? Because I'm supposed to be the man in her life that she shares those things with.
Right.
And there's a great podcast on it I'll share later, but this reality of if you don't make your spouse the priority, you're actually not only hurting your marriage, you're hurting your spouse's marriage or your spouse's relationship with their kids.
Yeah. It's all about it. It's all about
powerful.
being with that intentionality.
Sorry, that was a
No.
huge
No,
right, but
no.
down the line it can happen, but it can also be happening right now and you're not seeing.
Well,
it.
I mean, here's where for Melody and I,
We were kind of relating to some of the things you were originally saying.
A big stressor for us when our kids were smaller is we parent differently, right? So even from discipline, and we've talked around the table a little bit of this off camera, but Melody is the yes mom, yes person, and I'm the no person, right? If you ask me, my initial response is probably going to be no.
Yeah.
And I can
And
come back
by
later and say
probably,
yes.
he means every time.
Yeah. Totally get it.
Because it gives me, I can say no and come back later and say yes. But if I say yes, it's virtually impossible to come back and say no.
Totally get it.
And so, am I right, wrong? No, that's just kind of the way I'm wired up. So, with that, and we didn't have as big a problem with this, but we've seen it with others where, so kids start to play on that, right? Mom says, well, go ask your dad. And dad says, well, what did your mom say? Well, mom said, go ask you.
Right.
Right. And so you get this spiral thing going, and literally some kids will start playing you against each other.
Manipulating.
Exactly right. Crazy making. And they've got this whole thing going. And all of a sudden, and I've seen this probably more with dads than with moms, where dads were literally check out. And they're like, don't ask me, go ask your mother. Because the underlying current is it really doesn't matter what I think.
Yeah.
And it creates this bubbling resentment that is so toxic, because then now we're not a team. We're really adversaries.
Divided.
Right?
One of the things that's kind of going through my brain right now, I've known folks that had an intentional weekly date. And I mean, they were religious about it. And they had it every Tuesday night at 6 o'clock. Like, a funeral wasn't going to stop them from having it. You know, it's not like a big deal. But some of those very same people didn't act like they really liked each other.
Right.
In their marriage. So I want to be really clear to say, you know, don't walk away with any guilt of like, oh, we don't do a weekly date. This isn't about the logistics of it.
But hey,
this is about the heart.
But at the same time, maybe you need to look at your calendar and say, I'm really not prioritizing what's important.
It's about prioritizing how you find a way to do it that fits you guys. It
could be you put your kids on the bus, you drop the kids off at school, and then you go to Starbucks for 30 minutes. If that's your circadian rhythm and what you can do. Maybe you can both go to lunch one day a week. You know, where you for 30 minutes you sit there at Burger King in your car eating your invisible Whopper. You know what it is?
No,
impossible. It's not invisible. It's still
Invisible is the diet plan.
That's it.
Or even
That's the budget plan.
plan.
Yeah, I like that. That's it.
But even if you can't be in the same room, we've done this before where like my commute is so long, I'll just call her sometimes and we'll just talk.
Right.
And like, yeah, she's got the kids, but maybe she can go put them in the room. And so, you know, you were talking about G-Chat. Like, we do something very similar where we know when we get in the same room, it's going to be just chaos.
Yeah.
So
At least this way the boys are strapped. Oh, that's when you're in the car. So
Right.
they're strapped in the car seat.
they're starting the car seat, or like they're contained somewhere, and we can have a
Right.
moment where we
Mm-hmm.
connect.
You're just being intentional.
And I mean, it can happen over making dinner together, or washing and drying the dishes together, or, you know.
Whatever it is that it needs to be for you. It may be going to your kid's ball game and you both go together. It may not be efficient, or their practice, it may not be efficient, but you're both there and you're able to sit in chairs, and while the kids doing what they're doing, you're able to connect.
I think one of the things that we aimed for a lot when we were first married was this idea of like, we can like divide and conquer. Like Zach used to say to me when we were engaged, she's like, I can't wait to be married, but we can get like so much more done.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't
Two
know.
is better than one.
But it was this idea of divide and conquer, and in the years that we've been married, I've come back. For me, at least, it's come back to more of a like. But I want to be your teammate. Like I want us to work as a team, and I think regardless of what it is you're doing, if you're working as a team and you're working alongside each other, you can find a way to make that intentional time that you're redeeming to pour into each other. Because whether it's like you said, washing the dishes, or you know, handling bedtime together, like if you're doing it together, it's a little bit easier to redeem that time, even if you can't. Because I know for a lot of young parents, babysitters are expensive. They make a lot more than they did when I was babysitting.
Man, it adds
I
up.
was charging too little, but they or it was just that long ago. But you know, getting a special dessert at Publix and having
Eating
it as
it
soon
in
as
your
the
car.
kids,
For real.
you know, eating after the kids go to
wait
bed.
for your spouse.
Yeah. But you know, those are things that, like you're saying about, don't feel like you're failing if you're not having a weekly date night.
Right.
But like you are saying, find a way to be intentional about that.
And to speak to the core of the matter, so we're talking about like, you know, oh boy, what now?
Yeah.
And our big picture topic today was what happened. You know,
Kids are a higher priority than
right
our
when
marriage.
the kids are a higher priority. You know, I had an aha moment one time several years ago when I was thinking about how intentional I am with my kids when they come through the door from school. It was a big deal to me that I look them in the eyes, that I greet them, that I had this conversation with them. And then I'd be cooking dinner and you'd come in and I wouldn't even make eye contact with you. because we're equals, you know, like for the kids, I'm like, hey, I'm your mom. I'm going to do all this intentional stuff.
Right.
Oh, well, you're my husband. You're fine. You're an adult. Go do your thing. And I was like,
Or when the spouse walks in, here's this kid.
oh
driving
man,
me
how many
crazy.
times? Yeah. And there's a place for that.
There's a big place
Hold
for
on,
that.
hold on.
No judgment. No
Hold that
judgment.
space.
Do it.
That is sacred space.
I'm making eye contact with you as I pass you the child. Welcome home.
I made this secret arrangement with myself where I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. And I didn't tell you about it, but I decided to become very intentional that when you came home, I would stop what I was doing, even if it was for a nanosecond, and I would look you in the eye, and I would kiss you, and I would be like, you know what? I'm happy to see you because I really am. And why would I do more for my children than I would do for the man that God, you know, brought me together with, so the children even exist in the first place?
Yeah.
So just a little takeaway that has been, I think, really helpful for us.
Well,
As ships passing in the night, I think we're guilty of that too. You know?
You do.
Well, and
That's
if
great.
you're able to have an honest conversation and diagnose, we have not been the highest priority in each other's life. That's like fresh water, right? When you know your spouse has had a tough day, and there are days I get home and Lindsay has this really funny photo she'll send me, and she's like, my housekeeping style is, there appears to have been a struggle. So you get home and you're like, oh.
There was.
Right, but on those days when like she stops and gives me a hug and kisses me, right, or you do that to Dan, or vice versa, whatever your arrangement is, that's like fresh water.
It is.
You're just like this. Oh, like, I know we got to deal with this.
Right.
you know, it's interesting because I looked this up and I cannot yet find a verse that commands us to love our kids. No, we do. I mean, in the Bible it says to
Man,
correct
that let
our,
us off the hook. No,
to correct to correct
your
our
children.
yeah correct our children. To, you know, if we love them, we'll give discipline. And there's the directive for children to obey their parents, and we could keep going on and on.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a directive for husbands, love your wives. By the way, this will be another podcast for another day. Verse 21 of Ephesians 5 says, "Submit yourselves one to another." And the way that submission looks is carried out in verses 22 through, I think, 29. It says, "Wives, if you will, you respect your husbands, you submit to your husband, and husbands, you love your wives," both of which are acts of submission. It's not, I think
mutual.
we've kind of missed some teaching on that verse, in my opinion, and have overemphasized certain things. That said, the greatest gift you will ever give to your son or your daughter is to love their mom or to love their dad. If you love your spouse well, there's research all over the place. It creates a sense of security, a sense of groundedness for your kids that's virtually impossible to replicate. So when you walk in the door and Lindsay gives you a kiss, that makes Josiah and Nathaniel feel secure. Nothing makes a child feel more insecure than if mom and dad are at odds. And don't act like they don't know.
Right, even if you hide it, they know.
So,
yeah, even our special needs kids
Especially
know.
if you're trying to hide it.
yeah. So you know, a couple of things as we begin to try to pull some strings on this to bring it together. It's hard being a parent, and it's hard being a spouse. But if you're gonna be able to check the box and make it a win, I really do believe that you've got to be intentional. And I'll just remind you of this: one day your kids are going to leave. Your spouse isn't. So
Well,
make
they
them
may
the
too,
priority.
but-
Well,
It's our
The
prayer
goal
that
is
they
for them
don't.
to not.
yeah.
Exactly.
If that's what you're setting yourself up for, we got a bigger issue, and we
Right.
need to have a conversation.
Right.
So if you love your spouse well, not only do you get to keep them at empty nest, which is a great thing, right? But your kids are better for it as well. And we all want to be good parents. We all want to be successful. We want our kids to get everything they need. And we want them to have a well-rounded, wonderful life. Love your spouse well, and your kids are going to get what they need. Mm-hmm. So there are some times when we've had some debates about this. I think there are times you need to let your kids know that your spouse is the priority. This is not the time right now. This is mom and dad time. I think it's great to say, yeah, I know, but mom's the priority right now, right? And I think that's healthy. Thoughts, comments, smart remarks? Anybody?
I think Chris probably has some feelings. I don't know.
Chris has feelings.
He's the strong silent type over here in the corner.
I think I just echo what you're saying. I think it's important for your kids to see those acts of love when they're around.
Yeah.
Don't just say those for when they go to bed or whatever.
Agreed.
To see them when you leave in the morning or when you come home. To hear you tell each other you love them. To see those pecks on the cheek or whatever it might be. I think it's important to demonstrate that for your children.
I'll throw this out as well. I think it's important. Your kids know when you are in disagreement. Mm-hmm. They need to see the resolution.
Very true.
We grew up in an environment, both of us, with our parents, it was against the rules to have a fight.
We didn't see either. We didn't see the argument.
Right.
We didn't know what happened.
Conflict was squashed. So therefore, we didn't really know how to resolve conflict.
We have not watched that process.
Because of some of our dynamics,
And
our
boy,
girls.
did it show.
Yeah. Our girls, specifically Meredith and Savannah, they have watched us not only have the conflict, and we've actually been intentional with that, rather than saying we're going to have that conversation in the bedroom and they hear the screaming in the bedroom. We have the conversation.
We don't scream
in front of them, so that not only do they see the conflict, but they get to see how to resolve that. And I don't think I can love their mother any better than to honor her in a time of conflict, right?
And we've actually had time where they were aware that we were not on the same page about something, and we weren't ready to resolve it yet. And so it got resolved a time when they were already gone to school or had gone to bed or whatever. And I would try to be intentional the next day to come back around and go, hey, great news. Dad and I, we are on the same.
That's right.
This is how we came to resolution, especially as they've gotten older.
Yes.
And can understand these things. And I think it's important.
Yeah.
And understanding that origin story, I think, is important and where you come from. I come from a family that had those fights more out in the open. Thank you, Mom and Dad. Sometimes, thank you. And Bridget comes from a family that you didn't see those as much outwardly. So I think we were dating the first time we had a falling out about something.
I was sure we were done. We
She
were
was
breaking
like-
up.
she
We
was-
had a fight. We were done. That was it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
She was like
if you
leaving
love
it-
somebody, you don't fight.
She was taking off, and I'm like, it's just getting good. Like, I'm willing to fight because I'm in this, and I want to make this right, or I want us to come to some agreement about this. It meant something different to me.
That's right.
So once you understand how different your backgrounds may be,
That's
and
great
it's
Well,
just-
context.
especially, if it's a disagreement about the kids or how you are parenting, like it matters. You're disagreeing or you're fighting because it matters.
No wonder there are sparks.
It's high stakes.
You care.
Yeah.
Yeah. Matter of fact, there are marriage therapists that will tell you, as long as the couple's fighting, there's hope. It's when they stop, there's no more conflict.
Shut it down.
That's where, okay, we're basically on life
They're
support.
checked out,
Yeah.
I just want to say this is a bit of a turn from where you guys are saying, but I do want to say I feel like for parents of younger kids, this might feel a little harder to wrap your arms around because, like, I'm thinking about parenting a teenager. I'm like, they can do so many things on their own.
Yeah.
I don't have to like teach
Please,
them how to use a
go.
spoon. And I think sometimes with little kids, especially if you've got babies or infants, that can be hard to understand. But I think if you can find small moments to start practicing that, even though there's probably not as many and it's probably harder to do. One example that I just thought of is when we had Josiah, it was really important to me that I wanted to find a way to show Zach, like, you are more important to me than Josiah is. And so around 6 weeks, we found a friend who was willing to watch Josiah, and I left my 6 weeks old with a friend overnight, and we got away overnight so that we could have a little time, just the two of us. And then we picked him back up. It was maybe 24 hours, and bless them, I don't think they slept at all. Neither did Josiah.
They looked exhausted. Yeah.
But it was a way that I could say, and I think it's different for every new parent. Not every new parent can leave their 6-week-old. Some are like 2 days old. They're like, okay, I'm going to go sleep. You take the kid. Whatever,
Right.
I'm good. So I think that hits every parent differently. But I think if you can find those small ways that you're comfortable with, saying, okay, this is a moment that I can prioritize.
Yeah.
That, like, you know what, you guys are going to have peanut butter and jelly tonight, so we can do a fast dinner, a good bedtime, so that I can, we can I don't know, shorten your routine somewhere, sacrifice your bedtime for the importance of your spouse, or, maybe they get a little bit more screen time today because you guys need to sit and have a conversation, and if you put on Paw Patrol, you got 30 minutes.
Thank God for Paw
bless
Patrol.
those dogs.
Amen.
I don't
You
want-
dating
Yes.
a tiger for doing my parenting
Yeah,
for
and
me.
I don't want
yes.
anyone to get the wrong idea. We're not suggesting that our kids are not important,
Right.
or that they are not a priority. They absolutely are. I'm just suggesting, and I think all of us are suggesting, when we love our spouses well, and when we make them a higher priority in our relationship, our kids thrive as a result.
I want to go back to what you said about, feeling free to tell your kids it needs to be about mom right now, or it needs to be about us right now. One of the best marriage advice things that I ever heard was that, a marriage is not 50-50. Some days your spouse is going to need 98%, and you step up those days and you give 98%, and then there's another day where you might need 80%, and there's only 20% left for him.
Right.
And, I think that's true with any
good.
relationship and in any family. And if your kids see you, if there's some crisis and Chris needs my 98%, and my kids see me give that, then they know if they need it someday,
Absolutely.
they're going to get it.
Absolutely.
They're going to get it.
I think the big rock from this conversation, for me anyway, as I go back to the topic again, I feel like my kids are a higher priority than my marriage. I think the way we get around that is we are as intentional with our spouse as we are with our children. We want to be intentional with all of the people that we love. And again, one of the things I think to myself sometimes is, okay, I work really hard to do this for this child. This is what I do to love this child well. And I'm very intentional about it. And I love being intentional about it. But I want to be as intentional or more to do that for Dan. So paying attention to what lights his face up.
Yeah.
What are the things I do or say or take care of for him or go ahead of him or protect him in? What are things I do that make him go, oh, and how can I do that for him? I do it for my kids. Why would I not do it for my spouse?
And here's where I keep doubling down on this because I think it's so critically important. When you do that for your spouse, your kids are getting the benefit.
Absolutely.
You're creating a greenhouse for them of safety, of security. They thrive. I mean, the research is dense where kids that come from a good two-parent home, and I'm not trying, please don't go too far with this. I'm not downplaying single parents and what they do and how wonderful they are. So don't take it out of context. But the data is what the data is. And kids that come from stable home environments thrive in every aspect. So
It's definitely best case
it
scenario.
is.
if we
It
can have
absolutely is. So what are some other thoughts and comments? Here's what I guess I'd love to find out. If you were to, Zach and Lindsay, step out of your own skin for a second, almost impossible to do, right? And you were to step out and think that like you're maybe Chris and Bridget or Dan and Melody, and you were speaking back into Zach and Lindsay or someone with kids of that age. What's the advice that you would give them of how to make their marriage the priority over their marriage? Make their marriage the priority over their kids.
Sure. So I think for me, the one that, two resources or practices come to mind. One is, be a student of your spouse. We're very much student of our children, right? Josiah likes it when I do this, not that. When I'm disciplining Nathaniel, I normally have to go this way because he responds, I get his attention better. But with Josiah, I got to do it this way. So being a student of your spouse and what they love, don't love is super important. And you even brought up, right, like we haven't done a great job of like going to bed together at the same time. I love that, right? Just the closeness. The book I recommend would be The 5 Love Languages, Gary Chapman. Yeah. And just understanding everyone communicates and also receives affection differently. So Lindsay's a time and words of encouragement person. I am physical touch and words of affirmation, right? And so if I want Lindsay to know that I love her, I need to know her well enough and be in tune with her well enough and be a student of her enough to communicate that well. Yeah. The other resource I recommend is that podcast I mentioned earlier. It's called The Place We Find Ourselves, Adam Young.
We'll put that in the show notes.
That'd be great. Yeah, it's just a fantastic podcast. He does a lot of the same stuff. And what does a healthy marriage look like in light of having children?
Yeah.
So.
Lindsay, what would you say to
I think for me in this season, just being a team, feeling like we're on the same team, and it takes time and it takes good communication. And I think those are things that are easy to let fall by the wayside when you're just in a groove of this is our schedule and this was what has to be done, which with kids our age, that's kind of, it is for us at least, there's a schedule, there's a pattern to every day. And when you're not a team, I think it's easy to get lost because you're just not on the same page. It takes more time to get back on the same page and to get reconnected. But when you stay shoulder to shoulder through the day, I think it's easier to then turn face to face because you're already close and focused on the same things.
Yeah, that's good.
So I think that's something that I would encourage, and because again, I think it's going to look different in every season of your marriage, but and with your kids at different ages. But I think when they're this little and they require the kind of time they do, infancy to this preschool age, when you can stay shoulder to shoulder, it makes it easier to turn.
You bet.
Again, I think,
That's
for
good.
this age group, that's what I think.
Chris, same question.
Before he talks, they stay shoulder to shoulder by texting all day. Tell us about this magical app. Is it an app? What is it?
No, it's in
G-Chat.
Gmail. In Gmail. It's a little pop-up.
It's in Gmail. It reminds me of the time that my 90-year-old mother said, Melodie, what's an app and do I need one? So I'm
an app
feeling
for
like
that.
I need this
Just
down here.
please
in
tell me
Gmail.
it's not like AOL Instant Messenger.
No, it's when you
It's
have
exactly
your
like
Gmail.
it.
You've got mail.
I actually never used AOL. It's just a little conversation box. That
Yeah, it's like
iMessage,
Skype
but
or
like-
Slack
yeah,
or
yeah,
anything
yeah,
else.
yeah.
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 So Chris, if you get to step out of your body and you get to speak to Chris, what
That's weird.
advice would you give him?
Take better care of your teeth. No. You mean about marriage and about children.
Well, good teeth do. does-
Brush and floss.
Brush and
Lost
floss.
twice
Yeah.
daily.
You'll get kissed more.
I think
That's it.
try to be less selfish. I mean, I think communicating about this can be difficult.
Yeah.
I think you can let it fester. You can let it sit there. You can feel like the marriage isn't the number one priority for a long time. And then when you try to communicate that, it may not always come out in love. Or maybe never come out of love if you wait too long to say that. And so try to have that conversation and realize, yes, this is a busy week. Yes, this is a busy month. We have other things going on. We're not going to have that date night this month. But how can we make sure we have one next month? How can we get that on the calendar? How can we make sure we have time for ourselves? If it's not this week, then when would that be?
Yeah. Bridget?
Yeah, and I would say, kind of going back to the idea of, what your children see when you pour into each other. I think if you're kind of side by side and step by step as a team along the way, then when life throws you a curveball and the focus does need to be on something else, whether it's the career, the house, a crisis with a kid, a crisis with a parent. You have kind of this ground zero to come back to.
You're already in lockstep.
Right. You're already kind of face to face and shoulder to shoulder to continue that, and that you'll be able to take that on better.
Yeah.
That's really good. And Chris, you said something that I paid attention to, and you were saying, it may be difficult to have this conversation. That hey, I'm really. I'm missing you. I want to work on us. I want to spend time together. And we may automatically get defensive, like, well, you don't think I'm doing a good job of our marriage? When really, if we can position our heart and our mind to think, he wants to be with me. She's saying this to me, she's not saying I'm not saying you don't own up to my expectations. That may be what it feels like.
Right.
But what I'm really saying to you is, hey, I really like you. I miss you. Right. I want to see you. I want to be with you. So if you can receive it from a way, or if I can receive it from a way of, this is a compliment.
Right,
It may feel pokey.
And I know I've reacted defensively that way, especially when the boys were younger, and it was, what do you mean? People have been demanding of me and taking from me all
I
day,
do
and you're
one more thing.
right.
Well,
Right.
And you're asking another thing of me.
Yes, yes.
It goes back to like what's your perspective. It sounds more like are you taking it through a filter of shame, which is I'm not enough, or are you taking it through a filter of I want you? Because they're two totally different things.
Yes.
The shame
Yes.
filter says, well, what do you mean? Like, I work as hard as I do all this stuff. What more could you want of me?
Right.
Versus, I love you.
Right.
I want to be with you.
Yeah. And I think we've all done and said both. We've done it both ways.
Oh, yeah.
What would you speak
second one's better
into
than the first.
those that still have kids in the house and how to make that the priority?
Well, just kind of circling back really kind of to what I said before is don't just be, if you're in that child rearing series, God bless you, when they're little, good gravy. You're intentional about that, as you should be, and you guys are still cutting your teeth on it, and you're exhausted. You're really tired. Cut yourself a break. You're tired. So that goes a long way. Just to give yourself that permission of this is hard, and we're in a season. It won't always be this hard. It'll be a new hard when they're teenagers. It'll be a different hard, and then when they're older than that, it'll be a different hard. But to be as intentional with your spouse or more than you were with your children. And you say, was there ever a time in our relationship where I was more intentional with my spouse than I am now? And why am I not? Well, I had more time, before the kids were here. Well, I'm just going to have to be more creative now. But again, just as simple as looking each other in the eye when we see each other, lighting up, when we remembering how we feel and what's important, and being intentional that way.
I'm just a big believer that if we do what we want to do. So if we make something a priority,
but I want to go to the gym, so
then okay.
That's what I don't. Because you're right. If I wanted to run a 5K, I would find a way to do it, wouldn't I? I don't want to.
You're just Melodie signed us up for a 5K, and so I'm running it. She's walking it.
I was very clear from the beginning.
Yes, she is.
I'm walking this big bad boy.
Yep.
He says to me the other day, if you're going to run that 5K.
I didn't say run. I said if you're going to walk it. I said if you're going to complete it, because I want you to finish it.
You better get busy training. I don't need to train and walk. I'm just walking. Remember that? That was good.
Be intentional. You do what you want to do. And let's just get straight up. Priorities.
It's so true.
Priorities are what we do. Everything else is just talk. So let's focus on what's important. Put it into your calendar. You say, well, that's not romantic. No, but it'll make it happen. Right?
Romance will come as a result.
Yeah. So be intentional. And also, just remember, your kids, hopefully, you are raising them to one day leave.
Is that your nugget of hope?
Well, but oftentimes, I don't see parents. I don't want it to come off that way.
Parenting isn't your end game.
It's almost one of these things of they're not parenting their kids as if they're leaving one day, and so it's like they've got to be there for every.
That's that whole helicopter mentality.
So,
what's the other one? Lawnmower. There's another
Snowplow or lawnmower.
Yeah, something like
Tiger
that.
Mom.
Yeah. Where they get all the obstacles out of the way before the kid can even come on the field.
Yeah, let them.
I did not know all of these terminologies.
How you like that? Yeah.
Wow.
So just know that your kids one day are not going to be there, and that spouse is who you will be with, and it's going to be really critically important that you guys have something that you're already connected on.
So this week's show may be over, but the work has just begun. Be sure to check out the great resources and references mentioned in today's show in the show notes at wearetogetherforgood.com/podcast. It is also super easy to subscribe to the show so you never miss an episode. Hey, if this podcast has been an encouragement to you in your marriage and life journey, please let the people in your world know. Help us spread the word about the Together for Good adventure by following us on our Facebook and Instagram pages. This would go a long way to help get the word out. Don't forget to check out our website, wearetogetherforgood.com, for free resources, archived podcast episodes, and other ways you can experience a life and marriage that is together for good.